Hey record nerds, check out the next level audiophile furniture at sidetrackedworkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop makes beautiful record furniture. I personally have a Sidetracked Workshop double sidekick in my house, and it's not only gorgeous, but incredibly practical. Check them out for yourself at sidetrackedworkshop.com. Don't keep your records in crates, and don't trust that feeble IKEA furniture. Give your vinyl the respect it deserves with furniture from sidetrackedworkshop.com. And now, on with the show.
Welcome to The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. Here's your host, the biggest record nerd of them all, Nate Goyer.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 494 of The Vinyl Guide, the podcast for record collectors and music nerds. And you're going to want to get a coffee or a tea for this one. Well, you can grab a beer too if you want. Even if it's morning. Look, I'm not going to judge you, but you're going to want to be relaxed. We cover a lot of ground today. We welcome to the show Mr. Andrew Reich. He's a TV writer, producer of multiple television sitcoms, including the show Friends. He's the director of the new Red Kross movie, Born Innocent, as well as being an avid record collector. So we talk many different fronts on today's show. We talk about the movie, the McDonald brothers, working with them, the world of filmmaking, punk rock, and of course, we talk about his record collection, which is always fun. And I got to say, in the last year, I've done several episodes on Red Kross and the McDonald brothers, and they've had a lot going on. They had their double album, the Red album, released last year, which is stellar. They've had a book, Now You're One of Us, and this documentary, Born Innocent. And I got to say, I'm really glad to see all these good things happening to the McDonald brothers. They've always been very generous of time and information with me and this podcast, and they're always happy to come on and talk records and music and more. So the fact that these things, the universe seems to be coalescing for them and giving them this really big career moment is great. I like to see good things happen to good people. So with all that happening, I do need to share that this movie, this documentary, Born Innocent, the Red Kross story, is so good. It really is. I've seen it so many times now. I mean, it's so dense. It's like 90 minutes. It's packed with great moments and record and music nerd info. Yet it's scaffolded by a great story. You know, there's drama, there's really serious moments, but there's a lot of humor and tons of heart. And let's be clear, it's not just a story for music nerds or punk rock aficionados. It's a story of a couple of brothers, and they've had this amazing career, and I think this is accessible to just about anyone. I showed it to my wife, who is not into this whole record and maniac culture that I tend to be part of, and she absolutely loved it too. So, here in my house, it's racking up huge numbers. I don't watch many movies multiple times, but, it's rivaling things like Godfather and Goodfellas. Every time I watch this documentary, I pick up something new. So good news, everyone. This documentary, Born Innocent, is now available to rent online worldwide. And that's big news. There's about 6 months of screenings last year, kind of dotted around the United States. And some of you may have been lucky enough to be in the right place and catch one of those screenings, but most of the world was cut off from the opportunity until now. And I'm talking to you, Australia. I'm talking to you, United Kingdom. And I'm talking to you, Canada, and most of the United States, and even Europe, Latin America, and Africa. Even you emperor penguins in Antarctica can now watch the Red Kross movie at redkrossfilm.com/rent. So put that in your calendar, redkrossfilm.com/rent. Yeah, it actually makes a really good date night movie. Someone who your significant other who may not be as much of a music maniac as you are, I think there's a really good chance they will enjoy this film. And hell, you may even talk them into joining you for the next time Red Kross comes to your town. And this film is art too. So thank you, Andrew, for going deep in this topic. And yes, there is a lot of record collecting talk in the back half of this episode. Andrew is indeed a record nerd, and we get deep into his collection. So enjoy that bit as well. All right, without further delay, let's start the conversation with Andrew Reich on his record collection and documenting Red Kross. Hey, there we are.
Hey, how are you?
Look at the wall of winners behind you. Oh my goodness.
Yes, I like your repping Al Baril, R.I.P. there.
Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. What a week, man. It's him and Clem Burke
I know.
starting to drop off, man. Anyway, good to see you. Sorry in advance. I just got a cold the other day.
No.
I was actually halfway thinking about, maybe I should ask Ben if we could push it out a day. But then I don't even know if I'm going to be better tomorrow. It may be worse. So I slept with NyQuil, which kind of doing partial the trick. So I'll mute if I have to cough or sneeze.
Okay, I'm still expecting you to be absolutely at the tip top of your game.
Oh, I will be. It'll just be more phlegm. If that's Anyway, I'm glad we were able to get this together, and you and I have spoke on this one-on-one on this. The movie Born Innocent, I think it's one of the best music documentaries I've ever seen. To think about, this is your first movie, right?
Yeah.
Your first attempt at it, and I guess you've got a background in writing. You worked on many shows, which we can get into as well. But for you to kind of make this leap into filmmaking and this be your premiere project, what encouraged you to make that move?
My wife.
You got to get out of here and do something.
No, not in that way. Not really. No, it was really, and I've told the story at so many of these Q&As, but like I was just, we can get into my Red Kross fandom, but in terms of just the like real inciting incident, as we would say in the writing biz, I heard Steve McDonald on Turned Out a Punk on Damian Abraham's podcast tell the story of the sort of abduction that happened when he was like 12, 13 and dating this much older woman who he kind of half ran away with, half was abducted by. And it was just such an incredible story. And I was just, relating it to my wife and saying like, oh my, someone needs to make a documentary about this band because there's so many fascinating things about them. And then on top of all of those things, which I already knew, there's this. And she just said, well, why don't you do it? And it was just she just like tossed that off but it just got me thinking about whether it might be possible. And I was at a sort of interesting, junction in terms of my like TV writing career. I'd had a long time writing partnership that was kind of ending. And so it just seemed like, you know what, maybe this isn't a totally crazy idea. But that was it. It wasn't like I'd had dreams of being a documentarian, or anything like that. It was really, and I think this is probably true of like so many of the best things. I just wanted to watch this movie so badly, and like no one else seemed to be making it. And I just kind of felt like maybe, even though I really went into it having no idea what I was doing, I had this sense that maybe I had a combination of skills that could pull it off, which maybe turned out to be true. I knew a lot about the subject already and just the worlds, of all the different music scenes or whatever. And and I'm a writer, so I had some sense of just storytelling, but that was really just that offhand comment set me off.
But being a script writer, I think is that the proper
I always say I'm a TV writer, screenwriter, whatever you want to.
Right. Okay. And in that sense, you own the arc and you can kind of move these characters back and forth. This is completely different waters, yeah?
Yeah. And that was what was so hard to learn how to navigate, because there was this sense of, man, it would really be great if there was just a real all is lost moment right at this point in the story, but there isn't. And it's really inconvenient the way their story unfolds if you're looking at very classical, story structure, which is what I've been taught and what I've done for so many years. It's just like the beats really don't line up. They just don't fall where they should. And, maybe the most intense dramatic moment, which is this abduction story. It happens really kind of in the first act. There, moments that you would think, okay, they get signed to a major label and they get dropped. Boy, that should be like a really major moment. But when you talk to Jeff and Steve about getting dropped from Atlantic. They're like, I don't know, whatever. We had another show to play. We didn't even really think about it. It's just like, well, I can't turn that into this all is lost moment. They just kind of like just kept going. And so it was frustrating. It was just this feeling of, God, if I was writing this, I could write it, in this way. But once you just had to make peace with like, okay, can't do it that way. A lot of the tools that I have when I'm just getting to make it all up, I don't have, but you figure out how to do it. And I figured out some new fun kind of tricks, like it's sort of almost a different kind of writing, being able to use editing and montage and things to land jokes. Because whatever we should say, I'm a comedy writer, and I think a lot of what drew me to their story is these guys are so funny. I mean, Jeff and Steve are just like two of the funniest people. So you knew it. The movie had to be funny. But again, it's not like, oh, I can write like the setup and then a punchline or whatever. It's just like, but what I can do is maybe take something that someone says and then cut to something and like get a laugh that way, cutting to an image of, so it was kind of learning those new tricks.
But that's a job of an editor, right? I mean, that a lot of, and that's again, new waters for you, if I'm not wrong.
For sure. And, you are like, documentaries are so made in the editing. And I had an incredible editor, Aaron Elders, who was just such a key collaborator. I've said before, like, documentaries seem like they should probably all have like a co-directing credit between the director and the editor, because it's almost equal. And there were lots of just brilliant decisions he made, but it's also, as a director of a documentary, you are partly the editor. You are saying like, okay, let's put these two things up against each other. I'm not sitting at the keys and actual doing the physical editing, but I'm sort of a lot of the time giving instructions like, let's cut to this here. Let's put this shot right there. And in this case, a lot of the time it was just like, I think we'll get a laugh if we time this cut right and we cut to the right thing, so, but yeah, it's, the editing part of it is huge.
Right. And you recognize the beats, like whenever you'd be interviewing the brothers. I mean, I imagine you probably had a notepad handy, like, oh shit, this line is killer or something like that.
I mean, I didn't, because you have to be so focused and present, doing these interviews. You have to be listening and thinking of maybe what your next question. So I didn't have time when they said something to like you store it away a little bit, but it wasn't. So sometimes I knew. When they were like, snap at each other a little bit, it's just like, okay, that's good stuff. I'll probably be able to use that. But some of it was just like in watching back through, and doing the transcriptions, you would find those things. But, part of it is also just, I mean, you have to understand what a dream it was for me to just get to like sit with those guys and ask them every question that I ever wanted to ask and just have them tell these incredible stories. I mean, you wind those guys up and they just like say the most amazing things. So I wasn't, when I was interviewing them, it's sort of almost like of this weird fugue state you're in, whatever, it's just like it goes by and afterwards you're like, I'm not sure. I think I got some good stuff, but I don't remember what and when. It was in watching it back that you saw like, okay. And that's also the thing you learn about, not so much with them, but with some of the other interviews. Sometimes you'll come away feeling like, oh, that didn't go that great. And, but what you don't realize is you need sometimes just like one sentence, like one soundbite, one line. And that's really all you'll need. You might have talked to someone for hours, and felt like, I don't know, but you might have gotten one or two great lines that are going to be key, for moments that you need to hit. I always remember the story Penelope Spheris talking about in Decline 2, that she came away from the scene of Chris, from Wasp in the pool, which is, like one of the most famous scenes from that movie with his mom. And they left and they're like, we're going to have to come back. We got nothing. Like, we didn't get anything. We're going to have to reschedule this and do it again. And it's like the best thing in the movie. So it's like, that tells you, like, you don't always know in the moment what you're getting.
Yeah. And how, like, this came over, you filmed over, as I understand, like a 10-year period, something?
I mean, not quite 10. I mean, I don't know, it might be 10. Like, I think we look back and like the first day of shooting was in 2015. So, we're in 2025. So that's like, that is 10 years, but the movie's kind of been in a pretty much some state of completion for just about 2 years. From when we first started the first festival screenings and something, and then those first few years. So between 2015 and 2019, I did the Kickstarter in 2019. Those we were shooting very sporadically in those years. Like it was intermittent. We would shoot some. I had a job running a show, and so I just couldn't really do much of anything. So it wasn't until I did the successful Kickstarter. That's when things really kicked into gear because I had money to pay a crew, and we started doing a lot of. But yeah, I mean, there's footage of me interviewing the guys for this project from 10 years ago that are in the movie.
Yeah, I see the different levels of hair on Steve.
Oh my God, the number of. I mean, it's mostly Jeff. Like Steve's hair stays fairly, it changes a bit, but not as dramatically as Jeff. Like Jeff goes from like the full long like Red Kross hair to like the sort of John Waters, whatever like hair he's got. It's just like it goes from really long to short in between. Like he's got every length hair like over the course of this movie.
Now, how did you first learn of Red Kross? I mean, it's clear you've been a fan for years and years. When did they first enter your sphere?
I mean, I think the moment I really started paying attention to them. So I'm from New Jersey, from suburban New Jersey. And, like a lot of people who get into punk rock, it was through like a cool older sister. She was pretty like on top of stuff pretty early on. And she had the Nevermind the Bollocks and the first Clash album and the first Ramones album. And, sometime I was around, I don't know, 11, 12 years old. Like I just sort of wandered into her room and put on the first Clash album. And that was the first music that ever really spoke to me. Like, I bought maybe Hot Rocks, which I listened to some, and I had a couple records, but nothing really I cared that much about until like I heard Clash City Rockers for there's just like something about that record. And then putting on the first Ramones record and then Nevermind the Bollocks, I was like, this is it. So I was pretty, from there, just all in, and you went quickly from, punk rock to hardcore, and had a friend who had copies of Maximum Rock and Roll and was like making me mixtapes and so that was really, from like 13 on, like I was just like a hardcore kid, and that whole New Jersey Adrenaline OD scene and the New York like Agnostic Front scene and all that sort of early to 80s hardcore. And so there was like one other kid who was into it in my high school, and we decided the high school had a radio station, and we got our FCC licenses so we could become DJs. Mostly, we thought it'd be cool to have radio shows and play this stuff because it wasn't really getting played anywhere. But also, we realized like we could get free records. Like the radio station had very official looking letterhead, and we were like, we send on this letterhead, we make a playlist, and we send it to every record label whose address is in Flipside and Maximum Rock and Roll. And that's what we just started to do. The dot matrix printer, like, printing out, the playlist and putting it on this WJSB letterhead. And so we started getting just lots of free records coming in. And one day, and, I guess in 1984, Gas the Tanker Records, Bill Bartell's label, sent a package, and it was the FUs, Do We Really Want to Hurt You, White Flag, Third Strike, and Red Kross, Teen Babes from Monsanto. And I think I was aware of Red Kross with a 1D and a C. I probably had heard And That's Got the Hits. I was vaguely aware of them. I would have heard Pseudo Intellectual is on the We Got Power Party or Go Home. Is that what it's called? I always forget what the We Got Power compilation is. But it's that compilation that's got like 40 bands on it. They're all like 1-minute songs. Red Kross Pseudo Intellectual is like the last song on side 2. So I would have heard that. But Teen Babes from Monsanto, when I put that on and I heard Deuce, which I'd never heard the Kiss version of. But it was like, what is this? Like, this is amazing. And then you go through that record and it goes from that to, Blow You a Kiss in the Wind and Heaven Only Knows, the Shangri-La's cover. I don't know, their cover of Anne by the Stooges. I don't think I would have heard that Stooges album. I probably at that point had had a copy of Metallic KO, but you couldn't get those. Maybe I had Raw Power, but I didn't have couldn't get my hands on those first two Stooges records yet. I certainly didn't know Savior Machine by Bowie or Citadel by the Stones. So I didn't know the originals, but the sound of that record, those covers, I was like, this is incredible. Like, it's heavy like punk rock, but it's not a hardcore record. And it's kind of classic rock, but it's so much cooler than classic rock seemed to me. So that record just became really couldn't stop playing it. And, the cover is kind of mysterious, the pictures of them, and there's a picture of Lori Partridge on the inside. And there's all these things about it that were very different from the Necros or, whatever else I was listening to. And so, you started to see interviews with them and fanzines and look for those. And they were so funny and weird. And their references, it's which a lot were to the TV shows I'd grown up watching. And I just found them to be so winning. And I just loved everything about them. So I was on board from that record in '84, and then I was in college when Neurotica came out, and I just played that record to death. I was just this is just hitting every pleasure center. I couldn't quite understand what the mashup of influences was. I wasn't enough of a music fan at that point to understand everything they were putting together. But to me, it just was this is the greatest. Melodic but heavy, just catchy. The lyrics were funny and mysterious, and all these little hints of LA, where they're just laughing at all the assholes at the rainbow. And I was, this New Jersey kid, East Coast kid, but I was kind of fascinated by LA from reading Flipside, and they, those hints they dropped about all these LA references. So I mean, really from then on, I just loved every record. They changed a lot, but every record was great.
It's so funny. There's that game 6 Degrees from Kevin Bacon, but there's 2 Degrees from the McDonald brothers. They have so many connections.
There's so many connections, and this is something I also sort of said at Q&As. I'm you make this sort of Venn diagram of the bands you like, and somehow they just sit at the center of it. And it's a lot of for me. That goes from Black Flag to the Go-Go's to Teenage Fan Club to the Fastbacks to Sloan to the Muffs to Dinosaur Jr. to the Butthole Surfers to they connect all of those bands. They're either very close connections, like Jeff being married to Charlotte from the Go-Go's and being close to Kim from the Muffs, and to just, they toured with Dinosaur Jr. and the Butthole Surfers, and they were close with them. They just, and that's a wide range of bands that in some ways seem like they're not all that connected, but Red Kross connects them all. And I could list, 20 more bands that's the case. They just felt, and living here, I've lived in LA since 1990, so I've been here, more and more as I lived here and saw them over the years. I was this is the key. This is the band, the secret key that unlocks Los Angeles music. Everything comes back in some way to Red Kross. They rule supreme, over everything. If you see them, you're this is it. This is the epitome of Los Angeles. And I do. I've said the two best Los Angeles bands are both from Hawthorne. I can't quite rate Red Kross over the Beach Boys, but I try and think what other LA band has put out as many great records, is as significant, is as consistent, is that, and you think whatever, sure, Appetite for Destruction is a great album. I don't rate Guns N' Roses over Red Kross. And you could go down the line and just be yeah, lots of great records, lots of great bands, but they're not, when you take the totality of it, it's Red Kross is just gotta be up there, just shy of the Beach Boys.
Yeah, they're admirable in so many ways, and they're very authentic. And I love watching them. I could, they deserved a reality show or better, whatever. Just watching them go is hilarious. Even at that show we met at over at the Lodge Room, they had this family section You probably remember all the
Yeah.
folding chairs set up and roped off that they don't normally have at the lodge room, but you can tell because their families are actually going to come in. They're probably their parents and their relatives and everything. It was like almost a reunion that day.
Yeah. And when they play in LA, like everyone comes out and people they've just known for so long and people have seen them just dozens and dozens of times, but they don't want to miss a show because it's just like that show is going to put a smile on your face that's going to stay there the entire show and you're going to leave just feeling great. And, there's no more fun band and they always deliver. I've never seen them. That lodge room show was fantastic. And talking about I came with my two kids and, and my wife and, like they, it was like before the encore, and it's that thing of like, figuring like, all right, they probably don't want to stick around for the encore. They're like, no, we want to stay. Like, like 17-year-old kids who are not like, their musical worlds are not exactly what mine is or whatever, but it was just undeniable. They're like, no, this is great. Like, we don't want to leave. You got to, I'm like, you got to stay and watch them, cover the Osmonds, even though that means, that means nothing to them.
Now, when you started this project some 10 years ago, like right now, Red Kross is having this revival, this renaissance. It's beautiful to watch. I love it when, good things happen to great people, right? I love watching it. But that wasn't part of the story when you started.
No, they were sort of like, in a way, they were a little bit in a lull. Like they were, I wouldn't say they were like at a dead stop, but not a lot was going on in the Red Kross world. They put out, they put out Researching the Blues in, God, I should know this, but I think 2012 that record came out. And I should know because that was the first concert that my kids went to. I brought them there. They're twins. They're like 5 years old. I brought them to Amoeba Records to see Red Kross, so they could always say the first show they saw, not that they remembered it all, was Red Kross. But that record had come out. People really rightfully loved the record, but it hadn't spurred any much. And then in 2015, when I approached them, there was not a ton going on. And so, over the years, you can't say they're the most prolific band. So they take a long time in between records and which is why I feel like taking so long to make this movie was very much in the Red Kross spirit. But I do think, and I wouldn't be saying this if like Steve and Jeff don't say it all the time. I think by making this movie really did spur a lot of this activity that has happened, especially in 2024, just over the last, 18 months or so. That, because they got kind of screwed. They put out a record. They put out Beyond the Door, which just got released like right into the thick of COVID, and it's just like they couldn't tour. They had a lot of big plans. We had plans and they just all didn't happen because of COVID. So that record was a little, bit of a, disappointment in terms of like catching on. And then, and I didn't really they sort of made that. The movie wasn't far along that when they made that record, they didn't even tell me they were recording. Like I didn't get to go to the studio. I didn't get to, document anything of making that record. But once, I had, really gotten pretty far before the sort of COVID lockdown with all the interviews, and I was getting, as the movie was starting to come together, I asked them to write a song for the closing credits, of the movie, because I think, it'd be cool to have an original song in the movie. And I gave them this assignment, I was like, I think it'd be really cool. It wasn't like I was like, you could write anything you want, but to me, it'd be cool if you wrote a sort of origin story song. And I think probably the main reference was History Lesson Part 2 by the Minutemen. But I also mentioned Creek Alley by the Mamas and Papas, and maybe like Ballad of Mata Hoople. And, I was just like, that kind of song would be super cool. And so they took that to heart. They wrote this song, Born Innocent. And they were at that point, like writing some song. And, but that was the first song that they went and recorded with Josh Klinghoffer at his studio, and it came out and it was great. And I think, doing that with Josh and having such a good time with him as a producer, and, that really spurred along the songwriting and got them to the point where they had a ton of songs and could, had enough for a double album. And I think Steve was very much thinking if this movie comes out, we need to have a record that people can, a new record that people can then listen to if the movie, makes them want to hear more of us. And so, it was, you want the timing of these things to line up perfectly, and it all sort of ended up working out not exactly how I would have wanted. Whatever the movie, just for various reasons, things take a long time. It's really, it's all very hard, but it's all fun. Like the fact that that record came out and was just such a great record right around the same time that the movie started playing festivals and then started to get this theatrical release, and then on top of that, they made this book deal, and Dan Epstein, they did this great book with Dan, and it all just kind of like came together. And it's been cool that those guys say like all this sort of happened because of me making this movie is what really like made so much activity happen all at once, which is, as a fan, like that's the coolest thing, like that there's this amazing new Red Kross music that is in the world partly because of me is like, man, that's incredible.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Beyond the Door. They didn't invite you to the recording of that. I mean, I'm assuming that was an oversight. Were they taking the movie seriously in the early days? Hey there, audiophiles. If you're seeking stylish furniture to showcase your stereo and record collection, well, look no further than SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Sidetracked Workshop designs extraordinarily elegant record cabinets and consoles that add sophistication and panache to your music hobby. Handcrafted in the good old USA in the vinyl-loving city of Portland, Oregon, Sidetracked Workshop's designs are a music lover's dream. Made with real walnut veneered wood and brass accents, these gorgeous designs add class and taste to the record room and ship fully assembled and ready to enjoy. Just check out the designs for yourself at SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Look, you spend thousands of dollars on records. Don't keep them in a crate, and don't risk your records on those feeble wooden pegs from IKEA. Your music deserves the dignity of Sidetracked Workshop. That's SidetrackedWorkshop.com. Elegant solutions for the vinyl lifestyle. Oh, and hey, record nerds, don't forget to clean your records with the very best and safest record cleaner, the Groove Washer. Make your records look and sound their very best and store them with confidence using the new Groove Washer Groove Guard record sleeves. You gotta try this out. It makes a huge difference to the quality of your vinyl experience. Ask for the Groove Washer by name at your local record store and accept no substitutes. Or head over to groovewasher.com and use discount code VINYLGUIDE10.
All hail the Groove Washer.
That's groovewasher.com, discount code VINYLGUIDE10. Now you mentioned Beyond the Door. They didn't invite you to the recording of that. I mean, I'm assuming that was an oversight. Were they taking the movie seriously in the early days?
I mean, they would have been totally within their rights not to, like given how for the first few years, like how it was happening, they would probably have been totally right to think like this thing's never going to happen because it was so sporadic, and it's just like every like 6 months I was like, hey, can I come over and shoot shoot the interview? Like we only got through Born Innocent last time, maybe we could get up to Neurotica this time. Like it was slow going. I was a little bit scared that I didn't know what I was doing, if I'm being honest. Like that, I think was holding me back. I was just like, I don't know really how to do this. So I was so faking my way through it that it probably made me go a little slower. So I think they probably didn't, it wasn't so top of mind when they were recording that record, because it was like, oh, there's this guy, he shoots us every few months, every 6 months, whatever. Like, I don't know if this thing is ever going to be real. It started to get more real to them when I decided, because I got to a point, I was like, at this rate, this movie's going to be finished in like 70 years. It's just like, I have to commit to this. And that's where the Kickstarter, came in, where I felt like, all right, if I do this Kickstarter and I am successful, then I'll have like taken people's money, and then I'll have like really feel like I have to do it.
Obligation.
And so once the obligation. And so once and granted, I still haven't done it nearly fast enough for a lot of those Kickstarter people who complain, but at that point, and we really collaborated on that Kickstarter, because I was just like, what can we offer people? And they were so generous, and like, Jeff made, we offered like a handwritten lyric sheet of what your song of your choice. And I thought Jeff was just going to like scribble out. He made these beautiful spiral like drawings for everyone who pledged for that. And so that was really like, we were then in it together. Like we had done that Kickstarter together. And then once I started interviewing all these other people with their help, making a lot of the connections, and they saw, okay, he's talking to Thurston Moore and Kim Gordon and Des Cadena and Ron Reyes and like, all these people that I started talking to, and Kim Thale and Jeff Ament. And then I started to think they started to realize like, okay, this is becoming more real. And they definitely started including, whenever they were doing something, they would let me know. And then, the easy part in a way was shooting all that stuff and amassing this whole mound of material. And then it was just like, now what? Like, how the hell do I like make sense of all this? It was such a massive amount of material. It's crazy. And that's when I sort of wrote this oral history of, I didn't write it. I patched together an oral history of Red Kross through sound bites, through the transcripts of all of these interviews that I had done. And then once I had that, now I have the shape of what would have been like a 7-hour movie, but at least it was sort of like there was a structure. I brought on Aaron, my editor, and we just started to hack away at that. But when I've looked back through it recently, and so much of the movie is in that document. So many of the sort of like way the sound bites butt up against each other and some of the flow, but it was just like way too long. And it was just a matter of like cutting stuff out and then adding in, I had this insane amount of archival material that I'd been collecting over all of these years. The whole time, even if I wasn't doing much to edit, I was always on the lookout and trying to find VHS tapes and, on eBay and whatever, trying to find live, footage and photographs and, whatever, all that stuff, always digging and, looking for stuff.
So you had this 7-hour or whatever, this multi-hour vision.
Yeah.
For people who haven't seen it, the movie's 90 minutes.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah.
to tell that
89.
story, 89, okay, just under 90 minutes. But it's to me, it's like a Ginsu knife, right? It's just the economy of it is, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that would be fantastic bonus material that you've already probably planned for whatever physical form release eventuates.
Yes.
But once you had that long vision, you had this mound of material, you whittled it down, you made this what would have been a 6-7 hour cut. That's when your previous skill as a scriptwriter starts to kind of come in and say, okay, let's pull this out or let's emphasize this. Then it became more of a traditional kind of approach. Is that fair?
A little bit. Yes. I do think that is where so I'm, for most of my career, it's just like I've been a network, like sitcom writer, you need to deliver a 21.5 minute, final product. Like you don't have a lot of wiggle room. Streaming, and I've done some streaming shows. Streaming's a little bit different. You see these shows and it's like it's 18 minutes one week and 34 the next episode. But in what I came up in was like whatever, it probably started at 23 minutes and got down to like 21.5. That's really hard to do. Like, and it involves killing your babies like all the time. It's just like taking stuff that you love and it's having to say like, we got to cut it. Like we just don't have the time. It's not essential and it's got to come out. So that was helpful in just knowing like, all right, we've got it down. And, at a certain point, I did really decide, I was like, this movie's going to be under 90 minutes. I'd seen too many music documentaries that I felt like overstayed their welcome. And I had this thing in my head, like I was like, eventually, somewhere down the road, this thing's going to be on a streaming service and someone's going to come across it who doesn't know Red Kross, but knows all these other bands, that are in it and likes music documentaries and is like thinking about maybe checking it out. And they're going to look and go, I wonder how long it is. Oh, it's under an hour and a half. I'll check it out. Like that was the person I had in my head. Whereas I'm thinking like 180 minutes, like I'm not watching this thing. And so I just felt like I wanted to just make it a really, no barrier to entry. So it was just like the great thing about working with Aaron, my editor, is he had done the Jawbreaker documentary, which I thought was really good. Like, and that was one of those, like, I wasn't a fan of the band or didn't really know them that well, but I still really liked the movie and I thought it was very well edited. And he was the perfect editor because it was like, he's a music guy. He'd been in a band called Maps and Atlases. And he knew the general arena, but he didn't know Red Kross at all. So I was like, perfect. Like, I don't have to explain to you what punk rock is, but you're not like so in the weeds that you're going to love all the like super inside baseball kind of stuff. And I knew he would be a good sounding board when I'm like, is this interesting to you? Or is this just like for the super fans? And he would be very, he'd be like, I think we cut it. And that was the process. And some of that stuff, you're talking about like the bonus material for the fans, at the screenings, like the biggest question I always get is like, why is there no Desperate Teenage Love Dolls in the movie? And, Desperate Teenage Love Dolls, for those who don't know, was this Super 8 movie Dave Markey directed that Steve and Jeff were both in, and they had a lot to do with the making of it. And it was this real cult classic among like hardcore kids in the 80s. And we had a whole section on it in the film, and it was one of those things where it was one of the painful cuts because we'd worked a lot on it and interviewed a lot of people. It was one of the things but I was just like, the movie just feels like it's kind of, there's like a lull here in this Desperate Teenage Love Doll section. Like the momentum is like, and I realized afterwards, I was like, the reason is the movie is the story of Jeff and Steve McDonald and their relationship. These two brothers, they became business partners when they were 11 and 15, and they still are 46 years later. It's their story. Desperate Teenage Love Dolls, which is a fun, campy, cult classic, and the stories around it are fun. Steve was much more involved with it than Jeff, and it has nothing to do with their relationship. It's much more about like Dave Markey and Jordan and Jennifer Schwartz, who made it with Steve. And it was just like this isn't a beat in the Jeff and Steve McDonald story. We got to pull it out. And and it was hard to do because it's like I'd spent a lot of time on it, but I now have like a 15-minute finished like featurette on Desperate Teenage Love Dolls and the sequel Love Dolls Superstar that'll be on the eventual Blu-ray DVD. So it wasn't like wasted time, but stuff like that, I think wasn't as hard as it might have been if I didn't have so much experience cutting things that I love, and just being very ruthless of just like, the movie can't lag. Like if this is a moment where I feel like someone's going to get up and just go to the bathroom or something, like it's got to go. Like we have to move on to the next. Like I want people to still be like digesting the incredible thing that they just learned, and we're on to the next thing before and now it's the next thing. And luckily these guys have enough incredible things in their story that you could do that. You could just be like, wait, I'm still processing the whole like that they were on the Francis Ford Coppola's plane because Sofia Coppola asked him to bring Red Kross home, and now we're on to like the next thing. It was just being ruthless about not wanting an audience member to get bored.
It is interesting. It's overwhelming. The amount of information, and in a good way.
Yeah, that's why you got to watch it more than once.
Well, I've watched it many times. I think I'm in double digits now, and I was excited about showing it to my wife too, because it's short. She knows nothing about Red Kross. She barely tolerates my musical taste. But when we watched it, she was fascinated, and it was short enough, 89 minutes, like you say, that we could have a conversation afterward. And she's looking forward, God willing, they'll come to Australia at some point. She's now really looking forward to seeing them. So it is kind of a good gateway to Red Kross.
That's what I wanted to make. I wanted to I didn't want to just preach to the choir. I wanted like more choir members. And, I just figured, look, the super fans are going to see it no matter what. I wanted them to be happy. I wanted there to be enough stuff in there. I had all these audiences in my head, right? But the main one was like a music fan, someone who likes music documentaries but doesn't know Red Kross. I was like, that's the main audience member who I want to be able to like watch and enjoy this movie.
What are some of your favorite musical documentaries? Ones that you took a page from when making this movie?
It's hard to say what I took a page from, because what I didn't do is go back and like watch and study anything, but they're all so, I've watched so many that I knew that the form and the beat, but I would say, Anvil, I think is an amazing movie. And what's funny is I can't remember, there's been some controversy whether it was Jeff or Steve who said this when I first met with them. to like pitch them letting me, take a crack at doing this. And one of them was like, "You're not going to make this anvil, are you?" And I understand what they meant by that, which is like there's this sense that you're sort of laughing at the guys in Anvil for at least part of that movie. And yet that movie is amazing. It's so well done. So that I would put way up there. I would put Dig up there. I mean, I think Dig is really one of the best. And then there's different like kinds of music docs, right? Within the genre, there's all these, there's things like Stop Making Sense, which is absolutely incredible. It's a concert movie, right? There's Gimme Shelter, Gimme Shelter's unbelievable. It's very, it's not telling you the whole story of the Rolling Stones, like the way this movie is telling you the whole story of Red Kross. It's telling you the story of this event, and it's absolutely brilliant. But, Gimme Shelter is a horror movie. Like there's just like this, the mounting horror, this is the tension as this horror is building. But that's obviously like an incredible movie. I love Decline of Western Civilization. That was such an important movie for me as like this, New Jersey hardcore kid who had no access really to these, like the LA thing and seeing that. So those are all, I'm sure, it's funny. I asked Jeff and Steve this and they're like, the Tammy Show, the Tammy Shows is amazing. Again, it's a concert film, so it's slightly a different genre. I enjoy on some level almost every music documentary I watch, especially about bands. The other one I'd say that I think is absolutely incredible is the Eagles documentary. Now, I can't stand the Eagles. Like I have no interest in the Eagles music. I've always hated it. That documentary is fantastic. It is so.
That just came out, right? That's new, right?
No, I'm talking about the one that's like 4 hours long. It's been out probably 10 years or something. Okay. If you've not seen that, and if anyone listening has been kept away because of the subject matter, that movie is fantastic. And it's the opposite of mine. It's really long, and yet it's just like it's great. But there's lots of movies where I feel like, I don't know if this is like, Don't You Wish That We Were Dead about The Damned. I'm like, is this a great movie? Like, no, it's not a great movie, but it's The Damned. So it's just like, I enjoy it. The thing that I don't like is when they get too artsy. I'm just like, there's certain pleasures I want from one, from a documentary. And one of those is just like great archival footage. Like I want to see stuff and hopefully stuff I haven't seen. And sometimes people just get too, so I have all these, I love them all. And yet I have a lot of pet peeves from watching lots of them. And, some of them are just very, very idiosyncratic and whatever. I don't like animation in these music docs. A lot of people do it. That's cool. It's not my thing. I didn't want to do that. I don't like hearing from like David Fricky or Frick or whatever I don't like a lot of, rock critics telling me how important the band is. Like, in my movie, it's almost all first person eyewitnesses to their story. It's people who were there at moments along the way who saw it, or like, that's why they're in the movie. Every now and then, there's a few exceptions, like the Linda Lindas are in it and they're great. Obviously they weren't seeing them at the Hong Kong Cafe, but they're in it because like they're another teenage punk rock band of today and just sort of showing like the kids still like this band. But I didn't want Rolling Stone critics telling you why this like band was important. So, stuff like that. I just like that I see in lots of other, I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I'll tell you what I got out of the movie. And I don't know if this was meant to be or if you share this or anything, but when I walked away from the movie, again, I've seen it several times, I get that there's the trauma of Stephen's abduction. I don't think I'm spoiling anything here.
Yeah.
But they seem to put it away very quickly. And to me, I find it very difficult to imagine a world where something like that happens and immediately you're able to compartmentalize it, put it in a box and move on. I think, I believe, and this is my theory, that, what they created from that point forward is almost a dissociative state to where it almost, I don't want to call it a rejection or whatever, but purposefully moving on, especially from hardcore to a more fantasy world, something that was more comfortable and able for them to kind of cope a little bit with the big event that happened to them. I don't know. I'll stop.
You
What are
know,
your thoughts?
not to be corny, but I sort of just got almost a chill when you said it, because I think that that's such an astute observation. Like, I think you are really spot on, even to the point of like, dress up is something, costumes are sometimes something that a trauma victim will like use as a coping mechanism. And they really did post, once he got back, pretty quickly, not right away. You see some photos and stuff of them after he got back, and they're just like wearing like black t-shirts, and they're just, kind of in, right, almost hardcore looking, but pretty quickly they start dumpster diving at the, and going to the Goodwill and finding the flares and the 70s stuff. And they start doing this kind of dress up thing. And yes, that's the influence of like the New York Dolls and the Stones, on them. But I do think, and this is always going to be a theory. It's not like, and I asked Jeff and Steve these, kinds of questions, trying to figure out like, what was the effect of this traumatic thing? But, to hear them say it was just sort of like, Jeff will say like he started smoking tons of pot. But the way they do say is like, look, we just buckled down. We got the band back together. We just started practicing really hard. And, the parents had a very, 70s parent kind of, I think to be, I think Janet, their mom, did offer like some therapy to Steve, and maybe he went once or something, but the general approach seemed to be like, let's just not talk about this. Let's just put it behind us. They did, I don't feel like it was really discussed much after he got back. But there's just no way that it didn't have an effect. And I do think some of that dress up and, the trying to attempt to make this rock and roll fantasy come true, was a reaction to what had happened. I really do agree with that assessment. But again, it's just like it's another one of these sort of, you're looking at sort of classic storytelling or whatever. It was frustrating and hard for me and for my editor for a while, because you're like, okay, there's this huge horrible event that happens. We're expecting it to come back around in some way, right? For it to like, for the after effect of it to manifest in some way. And it just really doesn't. Except to me, the only I ask Alfie, who's Steve and Anna, his wife Anna Warrenker's son, I'm just like, which of your parents is more strict? And he's like, my dad. He instantly was just like, if there's anything where it seems like I might not be safe, it's like out of the question. And I'm like, there it is, for people who are watching closely. He's got a kid who's around the same age that he was when this happened. He's very focused on nothing like that happening to his kid. And beyond that, it's not like there's something really obvious, where there was some breakdown or whatever. But I do think that desire to dress up and retreat into this Partridge Family / Brady Bunch / New York Dolls kind of world, was for sure a reaction to what happened.
At some level, it appeared to me that's kind of the leakage of not dealing with that. And
yeah, because this stuff has to leak out. Yeah.
Also, there was no David Cass. Did you try to get David Cassidy involved?
He was dead I think he had died like by the time.
I didn't know he was dead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, he is dead. I actually think he died while I was like at some point during the making of it, before I ever would have tried to reach out to him. And based on their stories about him, I don't think I even would have tried, because they were just like, I mean, he didn't remember the Partridge Family. Like, there was no way he was going to remember making Spirit of 76 or remember Jeff and Steve.
Oh, like, he died in 2017. Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. I'm way off.
Yeah. You're just revealing that you're not as big a Partridge Family fan as Jeff and Steve.
I didn't embrace them to that level. Certainly not.
You don't have the Sound Magazine album on the shelf behind you, I'm assuming, but you should check it out because, like Jeff says, it's up there with Pet Sounds.
Yeah. Oh, so you actually got to spend some time in their record collection. I saw that big room that looks like kind of everything was stored in, all the records. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you would just be bummed out like about the state, the storage of those records. Like, Jeff's not like an archivist really, and so that's in Jeff and Charlotte's house. It's this closet. It was just like we had to clear boxes and boxes of stuff out to get them in there to even like get to the records, and the cool thing about, and I was so excited to see, I wanted to see his record collection, get to see Jeff McDonald's record collection. And it's like, what's cool about it is he played the shit out of, those records. Like they're beat up. But you're seeing his copy of like, Too Much Too Soon and, his White Album, which I show, and his, the copies of his Ramones albums and like those Partridge Family records, like you see how much he played them and you see, that footage. I mean, I hadn't really thought about it, but I should probably put more of that footage on the Blu-ray because I just had him just pick stuff out at random and talk about it. And you can't predict what, someone, if you know the band well enough, he's going to like pull out, I can't remember what that Cher record is from the 60s with all those great covers, but it's just like, I'm blanking on what it's called, but Cher records are just as important to him as Ramones records, like for sure. And I just love hearing him talk about music. So yeah, it was cool. But he'll say things like, yeah, I think I have all my Danger House singles somewhere, but I don't know where they are. And you're going like, dude, like, because they had every Danger House single because, they were buying them when they came out but he couldn't find them. He's just like, I don't know where they are in here. So I've offered to him because I'm like, how's the closet? He's like, oh, it's worse than when you were here. I'm like, can I just come in there and organize it and just go through and like get your records like properly stored and I just love to see everything that's in there because I know there's, I don't know if he's got like a copy of The Germs Forming or like a first press nervous breakdown or something, but maybe it could be in there somewhere.
What part of the movie, what was the hardest bit to cut or is there a part of the movie that kind of makes you wince a bit?
Not. I mean, it depends on what kind of wins. Like for a while, I was like when I'm interviewing the parents about the abduction, I wince because you hear me asking them the question about talking about it. And I am so sort of stuttery in asking the question. And you hear, I'm just like, do you think that maybe like, we could, that time when Steve was away, like, do you think that maybe we could, and because I was so nervous about bringing it up with them, and watching that, it's very raw because they haven't talked about it much since it happened. And you have to, whatever, giving stuff away for people to have seen it. Their son was missing for 3 months. Their 13-year-old son was missing for 3 months. And so when I, as a parent, like think about that, like it's hard to not get choked up imagining one of my kids being gone for that long and just not knowing where he was. Like it's terrible. So that is hard. I felt bad about putting them through it, but I felt like it was sort of necessary. And the good thing is they finally saw the movie not too long ago. Like in January, they finally saw it and they loved the movie and we're all good and they feel good about how they're portrayed and all of that. But the fact is, because I spent so long honing this movie, like cutting and just, so everything that did make me wince, I changed, it was just everything that gave me that feeling. I was like, we're either going to cut this or we're going to find a way to make it work, to the point that now I've seen this movie so many times and I love it. I love it every time because it was just, again, it was the movie I wanted to watch. And I was able to have the freedom to make it exactly the way I wanted to. And I just got rid of all those things that bummed me out. Like, so when there were things, I was just like, it's lagging here. We just cut it. Like, we just got rid of it. And so, there's stuff I wish I had. Like, I guess maybe I went to this. Like, for instance, there's a part where Thurston Moore is talking about the first time they played New York and they played Danceteria, and he's like, they decimated the place. And I'm like, God, I wish I had footage of that show, and I wasn't faking it by showing footage of an Olympic Auditorium show from LA around the same time instead. That stuff bothers me, but what are you going to do? Like, what I wasn't going to do was animation, because I don't like animation. So it's just like, those are that's just like, that's the thing. There's just stuff I wish I found. I wish, again, like another one, legendary show, they played in Tacoma at the Crescent Ballroom in 1987, with Green River and Soundgarden and Malfunction opening, and everyone in Seattle talks about it as just like the most incredible show. No one's got a photo, no one's got a bit of video. There's no documentation that I've been able to find of that show. It makes me crazy. Like, I wish I had footage to show there.
Have you come up with something like after the final cut was done, it was all boxed up, and all of a sudden one nugget appears?
Yes. But I'm going to use it for the Blu-ray. I did this. We did a screening, and the band played in Hermosa Beach for this South by South Bay festival that Larry Little at St. Rock put together. And someone at the Q&A there was talking about having taken photos at the show they played at the Santa Monica Pier, which was this, in Red Kross world is kind of it's the footage that starts the movie, because it's in the Dave Markey shot it, and it's in the Slog movie. And what happened after his Super 8 cartridge ran out was Jeff insulted Mike Muir from Suicidal Tendencies, like sort of said something about Mike Muir's mom, and the guys from Suicidal Tendencies, who weren't even a band, were just like a gang, started throwing kiwis at the band, and people started throwing it back. It was this whole, but it didn't seem like it was ever recorded. And this woman, Marla Watson, who's a great punk rock photographer, was like, I took photos. And I reached out. I was like, "Can you send it?" And she sent me like a roll of the most incredible photos, or some of the best photos of the band ever, I think. And they include the kids in the crowd, and the kids in the crowd. It's 1983, I think. They're like straight off like the back of like a early Bad Religion single or something. They just like, they got the bandanas, they got the boots with the chains and the bandanas around the boots. They're just like, they're so SoCal hardcore circa 82, 83. And she has photos of them throwing kiwis, and like Jennifer Schwartz, like throwing kiwis back, and the cops there. And it was like, these are amazing. And so those are, like the section about that show was another one of these things that I had in the film and cut for time. So now there's a great little 5-minute sort of feature, for the Blu-ray about that show, with these incredible photographs that, Jeff and Steve hadn't seen them. The little fat Mike from NoFX is like in the corner of one of the photos, like he was there.
I was going to say, you could probably look at the crowd and say, "Oh, that's."
I'm sure people could find a bunch of other, who were there, who was there, but they're so good. I asked Marla, I was just like, there's one, I'm like, you need to make me a print of this photo, because it's just like an incredible. It's not even one with the band. It's like this sort of hot female like beach cop with like cool sunglasses, and next to her is this kid who's just thrown a kiwi and is kind of laughing, and it's incredible. It's just like, it's so great. So that's the thing, that's the one find. But I will, we eat every part of the buffalo, like it's gonna get into it's gonna be used.
I can see an extra for a Blu-ray being like a FAW documentary on the lost McDonald brother Gary, who became an accountant. Yeah, he was abducted by Ernest and Young. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, there seemed to be a proliferation of weirdos T-shirts in the documentary.
That's the Easter egg, right? That is, was totally unintentional, but for the astute, you can count them as you're watching, and see if you get to three.
But
Giza
there's three. X.
Geza X, Des Cadena, and Greg Hetson,
Yeah.
all wearing the same weirdo shirt. They all just showed up to the days we were filming with that same shirt. Like, it was not on purpose, but it kind of does tell you, it's like, yeah, that's the band everyone from that era will agree on, like, was just like such an incredible band. And, I mean, I've seen them live a ton, but I didn't see them in 1978, 79. Like, they must have just been even more amazing. But yeah, I thought that was like a cool, like, there's enough stuff for, I sort of bristle sometimes when people are like, say like, so you're punk rock doc. I'm like, please don't call it a punk rock doc. Like, it's got a wider appeal than that. I don't think of it as a punk rock doc. However, like, I was a punk and I wanted to make sure that the punks who do see it, like, there was enough in there for them to know that like, I'm one of them in a way. Like, early on, when I'm sort of talking about Hawthorne and how Hawthorne was kind of destroyed for the building of the 105 freeway, I intercut footage from Suburbia, which was another, shot in another part, place that was same freeway construction. But it's just a little bit like, again, like an Easter egg or whatever. It's a little bit of like, people, I don't identify it as Suburbia, but the people who know. And it's just sort of like, okay, you're in the hands of like someone who speaks your language.
Trusted advisor. Yes.
Like, the film opens with my production company logo, which is like Reich and Co., but it looks like the Touch and Go label.
Oh, yeah,
And it looks like it's on like a Negative Approach 7-inch or something. So it's just sort of like, I just wanted those people to know, like, I'm one of you, but I also didn't want this to be ghettoized in like this is like the Cuckoo's Nest documentary or something. That's just like a only for punks. Like, this, I think, can appeal. My 70-year-old accountant and his wife came and saw it and loved it. They're just, we love those brothers. The relationship is so I'm like, great. Like, they're not looking to watch a punk rock doc. And I just didn't want it to just be thought of as just that.
Yeah. So before we let you go, let's talk about your record collection. Clearly, you love the genre. You've got a lot of records behind you. Give me a little bit of information on your personal record collection.
I mean, so yeah, I started, collecting like 13, 14, I guess. And I don't think I think I have like a good, I'm not in your league. I'm not in the league of like, the real, like a Damian Abraham or whatever. I got a lot of records free at the radio station that I was talking about, but I did have to, when I graduated, my friend who stayed was a year younger, and we kind of split that up. We split up the records, and I got some things I'm glad I got. But like, there's things that, whatever. There's a single by this band Nasty Facts called Drive My Car, which I think is just one of the greatest punk, sort of pop punk singles ever. And it's like, it's now like a $300 record, and I don't want to shell out. I wish I had kept the Nasty Facts single. But I have, it's like, I have my copy of Victim in Pain by Agnostic Front that I got at the time, which is a pricey record now. And I have, by like Last Rites, Chunks, and So Ends Our Night, and my original Milo Goes to College. And, so I always held on to I held on to all those records. Like, I didn't ever get rid of anything I really regret having. And along the way, I do have, I've got a Pay to Come single, but it doesn't have a picture sleeve. So it's not like I have a lot of, I have a Misfits Halloween single, but I don't have like Bullet or, Horror Business or something. So, and of course I could have bought those records for, relatively cheap, but even, Halloween I got new, in New York going in, I would take the train into New York, and I would go on St. Mark's Place, there was a bunch of record stores. And so you get stuff at, or whatever. You go to Bleecker Bob's, you go to 99, St. Mark Sounds. There were Free Being. I know I got my like copy of DYS Brotherhood at Free Being, because I think it still has the sticker. There was a great record store called Rocks in Your Head, which I'm always trying to find. They had the coolest bag. That store had these bags, which was just a bunch of band names and sort of logos, like in a block. And I would study that because it was all the coolest bands, some of which I didn't hadn't heard of, but it was almost like this checklist of like, okay, I got to know about this band. But I was a little bit like, I was a little cheap. Like I wouldn't, it's just like, okay, yeah, you could get a copy of Bullet, but it's going to cost you $40. I wouldn't shell out that $40 for that. Like I wasn't really doing that. I was, trying to find stuff used for pretty cheap. And you luck out, some of the time. But so I was mostly, like, hardcore records and punk rock records. And then, I've had like gone on, had enthusiasms for other bands over the years. Like I got into the White Stripes super early. So I have for those first couple White Stripes 7 inches, I got those like right away at the time. I was really into Rocket from the Crypt. I had all those, all those 7 inches, Guided by Voices. I was really into, but not early enough that I have like Forever Since Breakfast or something. Like I don't have those really early originals, but so I would get super into those bands and like want to just like have everything Pavement, like had every Pavement single, but and then I've recently, so Jeffrey Weiss, who have you ever had, have you had him on the podcast? I don't know if you would have, but so Jeffrey, no. He's briefly in the movie. He was their A&R guy at Big Time Records. He was the guy who signed them to Big Time for Neurotica. He has one of the greatest record collections in the world. I mean, it's insane. And I got to go over there and look through it and see like, he's got the All Tomorrow's Parties, like picture 7-inch, that there's like 3 of or something, and just and he said to me, he's just like, he's like, I don't buy reissues really. He's just like, I think almost always the first press, the original pressing of a record is going to sound the best. And so I started I started just thinking about like, okay, I have a lot of records, some of which I'm never going to listen to and I don't really care about. I've just, whatever, I got them at the radio station or they accumulated them. I was just like, if I start selling those on Discogs, I can just use that money to buy the things. So to have like first pressings of the records that I just like absolutely love and wouldn't probably just spend the money out of pocket for. But if it's money that's like coming in from selling records, it's kind of like almost free. Like It's just a trade. And so I started doing that like a couple years ago. And so I've got like, all the wipers, I've got like a Youth of America and Is This Real, like first pressing. And those are, it's just, I got Big Star, Radio City and Number One Record, like first pressings. And I've started just I was just like, I just want my record collection to be smaller and sort of unimpeachable. Like every record that I look at in a Marie Kondo kind of way, like brings me joy, and it really has been, and it's just really thinking of, okay, what are those records that like, I just will always love. And it's just cool to have, the first Killing Joke record or something, like the first pressing. And so that's what I've been. And I also have stopped. I was like, I have a lot of 7-inches, but I never really play them. And I have this drawer that pulls out and you can kind of flip through them. And it's kind of cool when every many years when someone who this would be meaningful to comes over and looks through and is just like, oh, this is cool that you've got. But I'm like, I don't think I need to buy any more 7-inches. The prices of like the 7-inches I would want have gotten so insane that I'd love to have all those Misfits singles and, I'd love to have Danger House singles, whatever. But it's like, I think for me, the LPs I will actually play, and that as an object, it just brings me more joy. Like you said, I've got this wall where I've got framed things behind me. And sometimes it's just like, like I didn't have like a Jealous Again original and I was just like, I got one of those and it's just cool. It makes me happy to have that like up on the wall and look at it. So that's what I've just been doing, is just sort of like, but the things I want, it's just like, I'd love to have every Nick Drake like first pressing. And but these things are just they're very expensive. When I look at my like Discogs want list, it's just like, oh geez, like when these things come up, like they're not a lot of $30 records that I'm still looking for.
It's funny you say Nick Drake, because this weekend I was at a record fair and some guy offered me a beautiful copy of 5 Leaves Left It was absolutely beautiful UK copy, great price, second press. And I was like, fuck. No, I can't. If I'm gonna go balls in, I'm gonna go for a first.
Yeah.
And it'll be triple that, or I'll be satisfied with my reissue right now.
Right. Yeah. I've been starting to look at that like Fruit Tree box set. I'm like, you know what? Maybe that would be enough. It's like it's got the covers maybe, but yeah. I mean that's the sickness. I will say it's funny, just whatever, because record collectors are listening, and you're wearing that SSD Control shirt. One of my best ever finds while I was at Aaron's Records here in LA, just looking through used bins, and I did find a copy of Get It Away, and it was priced at like $12. And this was in the like late 90s, I think. Like it just got by, someone didn't know. And it was one of those, like, you're like looking around, like, could this be possible? Like there's an exclaim, like pressing like in good shape with an insert, and it's like $12. And, those are the moments that just like, they don't happen much anymore. Like because of Discogs, everyone knows how much, stuff is worth, and you hardly ever just come across one of those bargains. But look, I follow you on Instagram and I see the stuff you buy, and I'm just like, believe me, I covet. I definitely, I have the sickness, but what's helped is I'm just like, if I don't buy 7 inches, your money goes farther, like when I think sometimes of some of these like Killed by Death 7 inches, which would be cool to have, but like you could get a Pink Moon and a Brighter Later for like the cost of, like some Mother Records 7 inch that like I could have had for $2, at some point. And I don't know. It's just like those are the calculations.
Yeah. You don't remember the records you buy as much as the ones that you left behind and you kick yourself about later. So, so does it count like geography? So I noticed behind you, you've got a Saints record, and that's a US pressing. Does it matter if it's US or in that case, Australia would be the one? Does that?
I mean, I don't care that much. Like that's just something, because like that's my copy, like that was the first copy I got of it. And so, sometimes I'm like, do I bother to get the true first press, or is it more like this is the sentimental thing? Like I actually like, you see, like, so sometimes I like having those promo, stickers. And especially I also really like when you get the nice price stickers on something, because that's also just kind of nostalgic. But a lot of like the Sire records, that I have, like they have promos. Like they put out a lot of promos for those records, and I kind of like I don't mind that. But yeah, I've now like if I was going to buy stuff now, I am more aware of like, oh, if it first came out, if the true first press is the Australian or the UK, like I'm going to try and get that. But for most of my record collecting career, I didn't really care about that. But yeah, I will say, Saints are just one of my absolute all-time, favorite bands. I loved hearing your episode with Mark Arm and Ed Cooper, and like,
they're coming your way, right?
I got my tickets the day they went on sale. Believe me, like I'm going to be there, and I've talked to Larry Hardy, about them a lot, and I mean, I just love that band, and and I'm someone who loved them pretty much all the way through. Like I love the post Ed, the A Little Madness to Be Free, and all those records. Like I was buying all of those, and really loving that era of the band too. But yeah, they're an all-time favorite for me, for sure.
That's great. And the band that's opening for him is called Chimers. So make sure you get there early. They are fantastic. They're out of kind of the Sydney area as well.
There's so many great Australian bands. Like I went and saw Split System not too long. I don't know if you know them, but man, like they're incredible. That was like the best like punk rock concert I've been to in so long, and it was so exciting to see a band. It's not, you're not going to a nostalgia act. You're not going to see a band you loved as a teenager who's still like, maybe is still great, but like a band that's hitting their peak right now. And that band just feels like, I see the influences, but what they're doing doesn't feel like copycat in any way. It's just like they kick ass. Like that band is incredible, and it just felt great to be in this. It was at El Cid here. It was just like a little, sweaty, like small show, and it's like, man, I love that feeling. Like, I got to see the Bad Brains and a lot of these like in small clubs, like, but now it's like, I saw the Misfits at like Bank of California Stadium with like 15,000 other people or something. Like that's a very different thing. And just to get to see that was just awesome. I feel like Australia's putting out the best punk rock, new punk rock bands right now by far.
Yeah. I've actually recently kind of made the decision not to go to larger shows. Rather than spending $200 on a ticket, which is what they cost you. I don't know what the tickets are in California.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's not that far. But rather than give $200 to a band who probably doesn't need it as much, I'd rather split that up and go to 10 club shows and give $20 to the bands who do. Right?
Yeah.
And I've been blessed by that just because I've now got to see, Amyl and the Sniffers in small places, or the Chats in a little fucking podunk place. And they're doing great now. So yeah.
Yeah, you're in one of the places where there's, and maybe I am too, and I'm just not aware. Like there may be great, I'm not totally on top of new stuff. But luckily our mutual friend Ben Merlis, he's the one who like, sent me Split System and keeps me up to date because he's still listening, to new stuff and like sending me stuff where, I could be like, oh yeah, this is, like this is good. I have a couple friends who still listen, and we'll sing, some of the UK stuff, whatever, like the Chisel and that kind of stuff, which I like too. But it's the Australian stuff is the stuff that's like
seems to be popping off. Yeah. Now, by the way, I also see behind you the Teen Babes from Monsanto. Is that the original one you got?
That is my copy. It's got a punch hole. It's the promo that Bill Bartell probably like packed up himself to send me. But yes, that's my Teen Babes copy. A lot of the stuff behind me is like I do need to. Some of this is pre my Jeffrey Weiss epiphany. Like there are some reissues that Teenage Fan Club Bandwagon-esque is a reissue. There are some, but a lot of these are like my Cramps record, my Dickies record, my like Minor Threat Red. Like those are like the copies I got in high school, and it's my sister's Ramones first album that maybe, I'm not sure it's a first press, like, but it was pretty close.
That's ground zero for you then, personally.
That is ground zero, like that. The Clash, like that was for sure ground zero, and it was just so exciting as a kid to just like be able to go from there to like then be able to go to CBGBs and actually see this. It wasn't quite like being at the Mask or being at like Wilson Center in DC or something, but it was still pretty exciting. It was,
of course, that must have been incredible. At least you got to experience some of that. Yeah. So many of us kind of look through, a keyhole lens on YouTube to try to put ourselves in that place. Is there any record or records that are your grails, things that you're totally on the hunt for? You wish you hope the universe provides.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of stuff, because some of those things I've since gotten, it's like the Big Star records. I was just like, and it just became, and look, for good or bad, like you used to have a grail, and to search for that, you really had to just keep going to record stores, and whenever you were in a town, you had to look through it. And now if you're willing to spend, you can get whatever you want, right? I mean, pretty much everything is out there. This is going back on my thing about 7-inches, but I would love to have the Nerves 7-inch, the original press of the Nerves 7-inch, the Hanging on the Telephone. Like, I think it's one of the great records ever. I'm always like wishing I had that. There's She Don't Know Why I'm Here by the Backlash pressing of that the Last put out themselves, not the Bump one, which I have. And I did get because of you, I will say this. Like when you had Jeff and Steve on and you were talking about the rarest Red Kross record, which is the split White Flag Red Kross ballad, Ballad of a Love Doll, Pieces of Chris Trent, Mystic Records, white label 7-inch. I did shell out on Discogs for a copy of that. Like it hadn't shown up for years, and it finally did. And so I did, and I paid like $300 for that record, which is like a lot for me to spend. And then weirdly, since then, people have been like other copies for like $200 have showed up, and I'm just like, God damn. But that was like, you know, that was, you know, you brought up, I was just like, okay, if anyone should have the sort of rarest of the Red Kross records, it should be me. And then Ben Morales recently found something. I think it's like a VHS. It's like a Def Leppard Red Kross split that he found that exists. And now I'm like, oh God, I got to find that. Like that's, there are a couple Red Kross 7-inches, the UK only, that I still don't have because they show up. They're really cheap in the UK, but then you got to pay like $40 shipping, and I'm just not willing to do that. So there's still, my Red Kross discography still has a couple of holes.
Yeah, I guess a lot of UK shipments, just like you say, cost so much, but a lot of people won't ship outside the UK. And so I've had to cultivate some friends that are like, do you mind if I have a couple records sent over to you? And then you just package them up and fucking send them over.
Yeah. I might have to hit you up for your contraband, you know, your smuggling connection, you know.
My mules.
Mules. I need a record mule for sure.
Yeah, anytime, man. So I certainly hope you find those records you're looking for there, Andrew. And again, I want to remind folks, Born Innocent, the Red Kross story. Is that the correct title?
That's the correct title.
Okay. redkrossfilm.com/rent. The good news is you could now go out wherever you are in the world and rent it. Again,
thank you so much.
Thanks again, Andrew. Great job, and hopefully we'll see you at a Red Kross show soon.
Thanks, Nate. This was amazing.
All right, there it is. Not much else to say except redkrossfilm.com/rent. Go check it out, and if you enjoy it, tell a few others. Help spread the word on this documentary. And I think your friends and family will thank you for it. And that's it for this episode of The Vinyl Guide. Thank you so much for tuning in. And for all you nice people who are leaving positive reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, well, I owe you one hickey. And for those of you who are part of our Patreon legend community at patreon.com/vinyl guide, well, you get to pick where the hickey goes. We'll be back shortly with a brand new episode. So until we talk next time, get out there and buy some records, people. Cheers.